Got a different look to the video today. That's how you know it's going to get political. I'm doing this in front of the bookshelf, which I mean, it's just one shelf, but, you know, political channels seem to do it this way. It makes me look semi-professional, and I'm holding the mic, which my friend will hate, so, sorry. So, I want to start this video and this discussion today by telling a story. So I'm at home the other week, and I walk into the kitchen, and right there in front of me is my brother in a reform hat. Now, I'm a left-leaning guy, I'm passionate about issues like climate change and trans rights, don't exactly have a lot of time for the likes of reform, and therefore, the hat alarmed me. And when I saw the hat, I immediately went on the offensive with the kind of arrogant, self-righteous tone that immediately meant the conversation was dead on arrival. Now, I'm not saying everyone needs to tolerate people with extreme views, especially if you yourself are especially sensitive to the issues being discussed. However, my brother was open and willing to have a discussion on the politics of reform and my views on them, but by immediately coming in as confrontational, it took a while for the conversation to come back down to a point where it actually felt like a conversation and not an argument. And for a while the conversation bothered me. I thought, like, how does my view of my brother change based on my thoughts on his politics? Like, I'm not raging against the idea of cutting people out of your life you feel are toxic and exhibit toxic ideas. However, I feel that in my case, my brother, who I feel was open and willing to be questioned on his views, I was the problem in that conversation by immediately coming in on the offensive, acting in a very individualistic fashion, and not stopping to think for a second, well, why does he think this way? What kind of information has pointed him in this direction? What are his circumstances? Etc., etc. And yes, every conversation is going to be chill like this. Sometimes you got to tell people to go fuck themselves. But in a chat that could have been like a calm discussion on politics turned intense because I immediately reacted poorly to someone without the same politics as me. And instead of turning the eye on myself for how I began that conversation initially, my mind immediately went like, fuck this person and fuck that fucking hat. And then, like, while I was still stewing over this thing with my brother, I came across journalist Ash Sarkar's interview on Politics Joe, where she discussed this very kind of defensive individualistic behavior as a major issue with the left at the moment, not just in how they interact with those that oppose them, but with each other as well.
To discuss what the left has got wrong, where do we need to go next? And Roger Hallam, who is the co-founder of Extinction Rebellion, he gets up and he says, well, what's gone wrong is that everyone in this room is a fucking cunt. Then you had all these people who were saying, you've brought violence into the space, I've been harmed, everyone's been harmed, this is white anger. How is it that a room full of adults can be derailed in such a way and can feel comfortable making their distress the object of everyone's attention? I just don't think Angela Davis did this. I don't think that Huey Newton did this. I don't think that George Jackson, like, you know, when he's in Soledad prison was like, how have I been harmed? I'm not saying that all of these ideas are bad or that they're always bad, but I think that good ideas have become blown out of proportion and applied to everything. And at no point has anyone gone, get a grip. You've got Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer betting the house on growth. And most people are saying, well, even if you do deliver it, how's it going to benefit me? And again, you can either look at them and go, well, you're stupid because line go up. Or you could say, well, actually, we've had years of growth under the Conservatives, which didn't benefit you.
And this immediately struck me as I saw my own behavior in this criticism. This defensiveness, which was just a part of my personality like I exhibit for other reasons, nevertheless definitely contributes to a negative air around more complicated discussions I may have with family members or friends, for example, surrounding politics. And I wanted to explore this idea further, so I read Ash's book, Minority Rule. Very good book. So I read Minority Rule, and it delves into this idea further as not only a symptom of the left, but a behaviour cultivated by our modern streams of information and outrage-bait media, and by political and media elites intentionally conflating culture wars surrounding the likes of climate change, trans rights, refugees, and immigration, for example, in order to keep the collective lower working class from aligning together to take a stab at the actual minority rule, which is the top 1%. I'm gonna put this book up here read it. It's very good. It's a fantastic read throughout, which in its entirety really narrows in on how the left especially need to stop being so individualistic, stop clutching the pearls of their culture wars to better communicate with themselves and their political opposites in order to create common ground and not to only address our collective problems, but to convince the people that the very culture wars perpetuated by the right is simply the politicization of the basic human rights of minority groups, so people are no longer manipulated into believing that their problems are caused by anything other than the rich taking everything that was once theirs, including and not limited to the very planet we inhabit. And man, it just really struck me as this like absolutely a behavior I exhibit. It's a behavior I recognize in friends and family, and just how we can all get so wrapped up in the mundanities of life and all these manufactured narratives and get easily manipulated by false information and false narratives which keep us from seeing the forest from the trees. And you know, some may say don't use personal anecdotes to make broad, sweeping claims. Tom Nichols made an interesting video on it following some of Ash's comments on her book tour, and in regards to the kinds of anecdotal personal stories used as evidence of an individualism problem, Tom said that picking out a random anecdote doesn't feel like a substantive basis for the critique of left and left strategy. Now, I understand your perspective, Tom. I like your hair. But have you looked around lately? All anyone wants to talk about right now when it comes to the left is how they're hemorrhaging support, alienating voters, and one need only look at how Labour is being received right now, or how Kamala Harris and the Democrats got whooped in the US election in November, to see that people don't exactly think too highly of the left at the moment. So during this introspective moment of loss, or just marveling at the fucking state of current Labour, left-leaning advocates are all saying the same thing, that the left lacks strong, bold leadership, a uniting message, something to get people emotionally, and that their focus on culture wars is costing them, and that they are disconnected from everyone else, and even disconnected from themselves, hence individualistic thinking. And if you take a broader look at the left at the moment, like who's really garnering attention? What's the counter movement to the absolute joke that is Labour or the Tories and the growing threat of, reform? Really, it's the likes of Gary Stevenson, who's gained considerable platform on his insistence on taxing the rich and not at all engaging with the culture wars of the left or right unless it specifically has to do with what affects everyone. And again, I'm not saying these culture wars shouldn't be fought for and that they're not important. Suggesting that in a week where trans rights are being fucking torn apart and obliterated would be especially ignorant and idiotic of me. But if you can address these issues in a way which is as healthy as possible and tries to paint a whole picture of the issues affecting everybody, exhibiting why these culture wars aren't really why the way things are, then that's the way we're going to rebuild the left and combat these consistent and effective far-right narratives. And that means listening to the likes of Gary Stevenson, the likes of Grace Blakely, of Ash Sarkar, just to name a few. It means not burying your head in the sand when someone has different politics than you, or as the mainstream left in the US and UK has done for a while, simply point at the right and use the mere existence of their extremist views as the reason to vote left. At least they've got an identity, what do we have at the moment? So whether you're using personal anecdotes or simply looking around you, the message is screaming at you in the face, so it's not hard to believe that the problem of individualism is indeed a substantive critique of the left and left strategy, and that a change is deeply required. And I get some of the other criticism too, like in Ash's interview with Ta-Nehisi Coates on Navarra. It's not so easy for these minority groups who are actively always under attack to not be defensive, they want to take up and fucking stand up for themselves. And there's a much broader debate to have, like they had in the video, where a lot of this stuff may just have to do with the fundamental good or bad in people. And I understand I'm speaking about this from a place of privilege. I'm an outsider when it comes to the variety of these culture wars. But I've got a brother who's trans on one side and a brother who's a reform supporter on the other. So bridging the gap between these views and navigating some awkward conversations isn't exactly anything new to me. But what I'm going to strive to do in the future, and I hope everyone who maybe sees this video does, or sees a similar message floating about on social media, is to try and engage with the people different from you with a little more tolerance, because we're stronger as a class together than we are separately. And I've gone a bit around in this video, but it all comes back to these core points Ash made in her book, and the conversation I had with my brother. We're not going to get anywhere screaming in each other's faces or at each other on social media, or making our world smaller and smaller and existing more and more in our own bubbles away from any kind of challenge or discourse, because that's not how change happens. Because, to use another quote from Ash in her discussion with Ta-Nehisi Coates on Navarra, the people who are different from you in your immediate vicinity are surely not as different from you as they are to, Elon Musk. I'm sure whatever differences you have with someone, you can find some common ground, because what's the alternative? It's further and further separation between people and the continued death of collective class consciousness, and to further drive people to your Elon Musks, your Andrew Tates, your J.K. Rowlings, your fucking Donald Trumps, and that's not the way anyone should be going. And that's all I have to say today. Sorry to leave on a bit of an anticlimactic end, but I think the more and more I begin to read and watch and become more politically aware, I've noticed some of the holes in my own behaviour and in a lot of our collective behaviour, at least from what I've seen, and how even at times of extreme political strife like we're in right now, the main goal should always be tolerance, with an aim to inform and to avoid the perils of individualism, because at the end of the day, that's what's really going to separate us and stop us all from getting where we need to be. Anyways, that's all from me today. Let me know what you thought of this video. Should I go back to just doing wrestling stuff? Let me know in the next one. What? I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.